This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from ConstructionLeadingEdge.com and ConstructionBusinessAccelerator.com. My name is Todd DeWalt, and it's my job to help construction business owners eliminate chaos and maximize revenue. Today, you're going to learn about some of the most commonly missed coverages when it comes to your insurance policy. There are a few floaters and riders that if you don't have them in place on your policy, you could be leaving the door open to some really big claims. This interview is with Sean Mulhern. He is an insurance expert in the construction industry, and he's going to help you cover up some risks. You could have some gigantic holes in your insurance policy right now. You're also going to learn about the risks of uninsured subcontractors. There's a lot of people using 1099 subcontractors, but really not doing it the right way and leaving the door open to some big risks there. You're going to learn about what to look for on your schedule of hazards. You're going to learn how to save thousands of dollars potentially a year on your insurance without giving up any coverage. You're going to learn about one way you can save a lot of money on your workman's comp insurance potentially by using time tracking. This is a little counterintuitive, but it's a big deal. You're also going to learn how you can prepare for an audit, because audits are coming, and Sean's going to give you some great advice on how to get in front of those audits so that it's not so painful. So plenty of good stuff here for you that could be a little scary, but this is stuff you really need to listen to and put to work. Sean's going to help you out. Before we get to that interview, I do want to share a couple of resources for you to get in your hands. Look, if you manage projects or if you manage a crew on a construction site, if you're a superintendent, a foreman, project manager, then you are primarily an information broker. Okay, your job is to get the right information to the right people at the right time at the right level of detail. That's the way I see it. So if you're struggling with communication, then you're not alone. Text messages are huge on job sites because, let's face it, they're a great way for getting information quickly, and everybody knows how to use text messages, even the guys with flip phones. But the problem is these text messages are not stored in one place, they're hard to manage, and they're hard to stay on top of. And because the messages and pictures aren't saved, they're not organized, and they're not searchable, then it makes it almost impossible to refer back to those conversations later if there is a dispute. Well, there's good news, though. I recently discovered an app called Field Chat. It's the ultimate text messaging platform for construction sites. That's what it does. It's all about text messaging. It doesn't have a whole lot of other bells and whistles that you don't need. And it alleviates what I call the Bermuda Triangle of information. There's this Bermuda Triangle between the field, the office, and the client where information just disappears. And Field Chat will help you alleviate that. What it does is automatically organize all of your instant communications by project, giving you an organized and searchable history of all those messages. It also integrates with text messaging so that it's easy to include anyone in the communication, whether it's someone on your own team that just refuses to learn technology, or they're a trade partner or a sub that just prefers to keep texting rather than downloading some piece of newfangled software. So here's what I want to know. Where was Field Chat when I ran my construction business years ago? The reality is, the truth is, I had to build something. I cobbled together a system just like this to do exactly what Field Chat does. And it really streamlined the operation. So instead of having all the fragmented conversations that left important people out and left out the commitments that were being made that I could no longer find proof of, this system will help with that. So here's what Field Chat means to you. More time. That's what you're after, right? Field Chat will accelerate progress while reducing mistakes, reducing rework, and reducing chaos, all by making project communications more effective. And right now, Field Chat is offering you, the Construction Leading Edge listener, 15% off. Just go to fieldchat.com/edge. And you can start actually a free trial to see how it feels to have communications that free up more of your time. So check out fieldchat.com/edge and get started there. A couple of other things I want to get in front of you. Do you hate bookkeeping? Do you suck at bookkeeping? Do you make money at bookkeeping? chances are if you're a contractor, if you're a small business owner, the answer is yes, you suck at bookkeeping, and no, you don't make money at bookkeeping. So if you would like to divest yourself of all the headaches and frustration and the rework and the wasted time you spend on bookkeeping, then I recommend you check out Apparatus Contractor Services. I've known these folks for over a year now, and they specialize in providing outsource bookkeeping, payroll, and reporting for small construction business owners. And if you're doing your own bookkeeping, I'm telling you, you need to quit, okay? Your time is worth $1,000 an hour. Go back and listen to episode 79 of the podcast, and you'll hear 10 activities that are worth $1,000 an hour. And I can tell you, doing your own bookkeeping is not on that list. You need to be out selling and training your people and negotiating better deals and networking. All of those activities are way more valuable to the construction business owner than keying in invoices and worrying about all of that stuff. So if you want to find out how the Apparatus Contractor Services team can help you offload your bookkeeping and reporting and payroll headaches, go to constructionleadingedge.com/headache, and you can actually fill out a little form there, and they will be in touch with you to help you take the first step. One of the other things, in addition to bookkeeping, that a lot of you folks tell me you're struggling with is selling. Either you get stuck in a price war, you get beat up on price, you waste a lot of time running estimates or running unqualified leads, only to find out that there was never a project there anyway. So if you see some room for improvement in your selling, then I want to get something in your hands. I put together a document, a one-page cheat sheet with the 9 mistakes that are killing your sales if you're a contractor. So let me ask you this. Have you ever put together an estimate, and then as soon as you see the total number at the bottom, you say something like, oh, they'll never pay that much. Well, that's too high. Is that what you're telling yourself when you total up an estimate? Well, there's something going on in your brain that you're not alone, but there's something going on that you have to understand what's behind that. You're going to learn about that when you go download this cheat sheet. Also, you're going to learn about how to create time. There are 2 things you're probably doing that are wasting a lot of your time. And then you're probably missing out on some of the easiest profit in your business because of this other mistake. When you read this, you'll probably kick yourself for not doing this one thing that could boost your profits with practically zero effort. So if you would like to get your hands on this one-page download, the 9 mistakes that are killing your sales if you're a contractor, just go to constructionleadingedge.com/sell. That's constructionleadingedge.com/SELL. And last thing, if you have not downloaded my free video series, The Secrets of Successful Contractors, and if you'd like to learn how do the big boys do it, how are they growing their business, how do the big successful contractors stay out of cash flow crunch mode, how are they buying new equipment and trucks and all of this stuff, what are the big successful companies doing that I'm not doing? If you want to answer those questions, then go to constructionleadingedge.com/owner, OWNER, and you can request your free video series, The Secrets of Successful Contractors. All right, now, without further ado, let's get to the interview with Sean Mulhern, where you can learn how to avoid some of the biggest mistakes that contractors are making when it comes to their insurance policies. Enjoy. Sean, thanks for being on the podcast. How's it going today?
Todd, I'm doing great. Thanks you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump into it and talk about some of the risks that contractors need to be aware of. You're all about managing risk, reducing risk. So what are the risks that may not be so apparent to working with uninsured subcontractors these days?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. It's an area that we're seeing come up quite a bit more with our clients. We're out here in Colorado, and we're finding really nationwide, but in Colorado specifically, we're seeing carriers are really cracking down on the uninsured subs, and we're finding most of our clients are maybe just not aware of some of the disadvantages. So one of the big ones right out of the gates that we find most people can get a little confused on is when you're using that uninsured sub, you may not be carrying work comp, but if that sub is injured on a job site, the work comp carriers and the GL carriers kind of look at it as, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, they're going to call it a duck. They're going to think it's an employee. So the big one is you can get hit with a work comp audit for all of that sub cost that you were using for uninsured subs, which you never want to get hit in the pocketbook for something like that. A couple other areas, again, going along with that audit, you're finding that carriers are, overall insurance is really kind of changing. Policies used to be, sort of a one size fits all. You kind of got one here, you got one there. And they were very, very similar. And now you're finding, since unfortunately carriers are losing money because there's a lot more claim activity, they're pulling little bits of pieces out of policies. And so you'll find a lot of general liability policies with an exclusion to uninsured subs, which essentially just means, hey, if you use an uninsured sub and that sub causes damage to a job site you're working on, well, the insurance isn't even going to pick it up for yourself, which can be a huge one. These claims can, it is not uncommon to see what seems like small claim skyrocket to $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 very, very quickly. And if you don't have your general liability coming in to take it, you're paying that out of pocket. And depending on the style of business, that can close your doors pretty darn quick.
Yeah. And how far, and we'll talk about how to cover those risks, but I assume the same thing could happen for a second tier, third tier sub. Somebody shows up on the job site and they're not covered by workman's comp, then that claim is just going to keep rolling until it hits somebody that has a policy in place, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the way I try to think of it is who's the contract with? If you're working with a homeowner or if you're working with a developer, that's where the contract is. So let's just take a homeowner, for example. Somebody comes to my house to, let's just say they're going to completely remodel my home. There's going to be a lot of different subcontractors that are coming on to the job site, but my contract is with, ABC Home Renovations. So something happens to the job and on the job and there's damage. Well, as the homeowner, I'm coming after who I have my contract with, and it's ABC Homeowners. Should ABC Homeowners have the proper risk transfer protocols in place to say, hey, I've got a sub coming on, their insurance is going to take it because it's their insurance that should take it. That's kind of how the chain would fall. In the event though that I come to ABC Homeowners and they go find their sub and that sub doesn't have insurance, then it's going to fall right back onto ABC Homeowners, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So this happens. Actually, I interviewed a guy recently. This episode is probably out by now, but his biggest mistake, his most expensive mistake involved having guys work on a job site only to find out that the workman's comp policy didn't go into effect until the following day, and this guy fell off a roof. So he fell off a roof on a Monday. The policy had been paid, the check had been paid, but the policy wasn't in force until Tuesday morning, and it was a six-figure mistake. And
yikes.
So often overlooked. And I think when you really think about it, all the people that are on your job sites, from delivery drivers to second-tier subcontractors, people walking around job sites, it's imperative that you have a good risk management program in place to make sure that anybody doing work on your site is under a workman's comp policy, general liability policy, and they're properly covered. Otherwise, you could have a career-ending, terminable extinction level event on your hands.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yep. Sorry to bring the bad news, but I guess there are the worst time to find that out is when you get the claim and you realize you have to close your doors. The good news is that you can put things in place to avoid that situation. So let's talk about some of these let's talk about the 1099 subcontractor. A lot of guys are like, I talked to a roofing contractor to do some work on my house recently. And I said, send me your insurance certificate. And he sent me an insurance certificate that had no workman's comp on it. And He said, well, I don't need it. Like, well, whoever's going to be on my roof is going to have workman's comp. Um, so because his theory was, well, these guys are all 1099 subcontractors. And there's a lot of this going on, especially in the remodeling business, a lot of 1099 subcontractors. So let's talk about this. What are the risks of the 1099 subcontractor that are not so apparent to folks who are working with them right now?
Yeah, great. The biggest area we go over with our clients is just the understanding of what they're doing when they're going to use an uninsured sub. So, or an insured sub, for that matter, any 1099. There's a couple ways to think about it. And I'll go, maybe kind of with the riskiest first. If you're going to use that uninsured sub, you certainly still can. It's just understanding that let's make it sure that your policy endorses it. You've got an endorsement to actually cover that uninsured sub. There are policies that will put an endorsement on there that says, hey, we will cover the work if the uninsured sub has some sort of damage that's resulting from them. It might be a higher rate. You may be paying a higher deductible, which, in the event of a claim, it can go, typically you're seeing a $0 or $1,000, maybe a $5,000 deductible. Most of the time, the endorsement for an uninsured sub is going to be maybe a $25,000 deductible. So you got to really take that into account and say, okay, if we're struggling to find subs and the only people we can get on the job are going to be uninsured, at the very least, let's at least make sure we've got that in place so we're not going out of business. That'd be the place you start. Second would be, consider even looking at putting a GL in place for them. If for some reason you're in that same scenario and it's a great sub, they just can't get insurance for some reason, they don't want to, but they do great work for you and you like working with them. Well, we have clients that they'll just pay to go get that person an LLC set up, and they'll pay to put a GL in place for them. So that, again, sometimes that offset in cost is very, very similar. And then again, you're protecting your GL so that in the event of a claim, it's going on your subs GL, which again, ultimately you paid for, but you can then make the decision down the road, hey, do we still want to work with the sub or not? And if they want to get their own insurance in place, it's really on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Kind of a creative way around it.
Yeah, I like that. One issue that I ran into years ago when my general liability policy was audited, I got hit with this huge increase because they saw a lot of subcontractors as employees. And we're going to talk about how to prepare for an audit. But for somebody who has not been through an audit, what do they need to realize about how insurance companies look at these uninsured subcontractors, and then what's the impact to the contractor's general liability cost?
Yeah. So with an uninsured sub, you really run into the two areas that we've kind of alluded to, is the GL and the work comp. So you'll find a lot of contractors, since it's, if you're a paper contractor where you're really subbing everything out, nothing wrong with that, but a lot of times you're not carrying work comp yourself. With an uninsured sub coming onto the job site, they will get hit onto a work comp for you. You'll see a work comp carrier or a state fund that handles the work comp, which is all going to be different by state. They're going to come in and go, oh, look at that. You've got these uninsured subcontractors. You're essentially trying to skirt the system by paying them as 1099 and not as an employee. And, so the big headache is, oh, wow, I got this gigantic audit that I wasn't expecting, which can be pretty hefty. You see them climb pretty high, pretty quick. Same thing on your GL, depending on the auditor that comes out. If they're going to deem that uninsured sub, quote unquote uninsured sub, as an employee, again, if you're wearing your shirt, your logo, and it looks like an employee and you're just paying them 1099, they're going to go, no, that's an employee. If they're working for other companies and other contractors, that's one thing. But if essentially, if you tell them where to go, what to do, and when to be there, they're going to call that an employee. So again, you're going to change whatever that whatever that subcontractor cost was over to employee payroll. And if you ever take a look at your general liability policy, there's always one page on there. It's your schedule of hazards. It's exactly how your policy is being rated. You will always notice that the subcontractor rate for any type of work you're doing compared to the employee payroll rate is drastically different. And that's because when it's an employee, your policy is what's picking up the claim. When it's an actual insured sub, it's the other person's policy picking up the claim. So less likely that your policy is going to come in, which is why it's rated so much lower. So the big one is going to be obviously audits. The other one is that we see quite a bit is you've got that uninsured sub that's out there. They might be your best friend. They might be your neighbor. They might be your brother. But they get injured. They fall off a ladder and break both their ankles, and they can't work for 6, 8, 9, 10 months. At the end of the day, when it comes down to money, friendship can sometimes get pushed to the side. And very quickly, if they go speak to a lawyer or somebody and they find out, lawyers are smart, if they go, oh, you didn't have insurance and you were working on this guy's job site, we'll just go make a work comp claim against them and you'll be set. And it's going to be very, very hard to get past that. So that's a big area that people most of the time just don't even know, because they think, oh, I've got a sub and I don't need to have work comp and we're good to go.
Yeah. I can imagine there are quite a few people listening to this right now. The blood is draining out of their head and they're looking at their phone, maybe pulling up their insurance agent's phone number to call them. Good stuff. So we've exposed some of the risks, and those are very important things to look at. Now let's talk about some ways people can save money on insurance without taking on more risk. How can they get the same level or the right level of coverage and save money? We've talked about a few strategies before we hit record, but walk us through some of the top things people can do if they want to save money without giving up any coverage.
Perfect. Yeah, that's where, honestly, this is where I make my money by helping people, being an advocate for really going to the market and knowing what sort of programs and packages are out there. And honestly, every business is different. You could look at 100 different roofing companies, for example, and there's going to be 100 different roofing companies there and 100 different ways to look at it. So the biggest one is how detailed are you in your bookkeeping, so to speak. How are you classifying the work that you do? A lot of people will just, fly by the seat of their pants and they'll go, hey, we have, 5 million in revenue, and roughly 3 million in subcontractor cost, and we're a roofer. And so it's all going to be slapped onto the roofing classification code, which is definitely pretty high. In little tidbit, when you get audited, carriers are looking to put all of your payroll, all of your sub costs on the highest class of business. So they're looking to get more out of you. So the easiest one is track your work, as closely as you can. Roofing is a great example because it's pretty cut and dry. Roofing is very expensive, but gutters and siding and windows are not. So if you're doing, or paint even, so, large hailstorm comes through and you're doing roofs, and that's your bread and butter. Well, let's try to split off, let's siphon off all of the work that's going to be gutters. How much of that is going to be gutters? Is it going to be 10%? Is it going to be 5%? And that number is surprising to people. If they even think 5 and 10%, if you can offset 100 or 200,000, 500,000, a million of your sub costs from roofing to say gutters or painting or drywall or siding, that can have multiple thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in savings right then and there. And all you did was just put the money in the right bucket.
Yeah, and if somebody is thinking, oh man, I need to set up some cost codes and do a better job of job costing, is there a schedule? Where would they go to find out how insurance companies classify different risk categories so that they can set up cost codes or job codes accordingly?
That's a great question. That's super proactive as well. The easiest way to do it would be to email your agent. and just say, hey, here's the general classes of work that we could do. And what we'll do on a client's policy is we go through all this on the front end when we're kind of just getting a really good understanding and scope of the work. Even if it's a roofing company, I will always throw on the policy what's called an if any basis. It just shows you the rate for what something's going to be. And so we just try to add as much as we can on there, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be charged for it. It just shows you what that rate would be. For example, a company that does roofing and that's all they do, they don't do any gutters, they don't even sub it out, will still throw gutters, siding, windows, sometimes drywall on there. And a lot of times they'll come back and go, hey, look, why are all these on there? And we just go, hey, that's just in case it comes down to this year, you just decide to do it on a whim. Well, now you know what the rate's going to be. And then what we find a lot of times is they see the rate and they go, oh my goodness, this is so much less than the roofing one. Well, we just kind of thought that if we were going to do the gutters and this, it was just going to add to our cost. So we send it to somebody else to do. And they realized, gosh, we could just bring those subs on ourselves and, add some more bottom line to our own business. So again, a quick email to your agent and just saying, hey, here's some of the other areas that we might do work in. We'd like to know what that rate would be. And they should be able to very quickly endorse your policy. And again, it's an, quote unquote, if any basis, which just means if you do it, here's what the rate would be.
Got it. Good stuff. What are some other strategies for saving money on insurance without giving up any coverage?
So one of the areas that it depends on the business, but I've really been pushing some clients towards is when you're looking at your GL, you're always going to be rated on really one of two ways. It's either gross revenue, or it's going to be your sub cost, material cost, and employee payroll. A lot of people have a preference one way or the other. It really doesn't matter, to be honest, one way or the other, which you utilize. It's really a matter of ease of doing business for you. So going along with what we were just talking about with multiple classifications, if you've got a rock star in the office as a bookkeeper for you and they can help you classify that really well, well, then sub cost and payroll is really great, because you can really get very detailed, very finite with exactly where you're going to put that. If that's tougher for you, it can be kind of a headache. Again, that leads to audits, which we'll talk about a little later. But if that's a headache, well, go with a gross sales rating system. What the carriers will typically do, and what a good agent will do for you, is they'll really beat up the underwriter a little bit. You'll still give the underwriter and the carrier your sub cost and your payroll and those numbers. However, they'll back into a gross revenue rating, which just means at the end of the year, when it comes audit, you don't have to worry about proving what you told them at the beginning of the year, that you were going to do this much and this much and this much in these categories. You just come to them with, hey, here's my revenue. And they go, cool. You said you were going to do 2 million. You did 2.1. So we're good to go. That can be very, very easy. And oftentimes, if you're going to stay with a carrier for maybe 2 or 3 years, that rate can be a little bit more stable than going on sub cost and payroll, because that can really fluctuate with the carrier's loss ratios. If they're taking a lot of losses, they're going to increase those rates on those classifications, but your revenue can stay a little bit more, little less choppy, if that makes sense. So that's a really, really good one. The other one, and this one is not as much what you can do. It's about finding a really good agent that can really go to bat for you. And that's what you're paying your agent for is most agents, a lot of people don't necessarily realize, we all really have very similar markets. Every agency is going to have maybe 1 or 2 feathers in their cap that another one doesn't, that they hold their hat on. But at the end of the day, this is very different from a personal lines home and auto setup, where that's been very commoditized, and nothing wrong with that. It's just, you can kind of go to any agent, they're going to have the same carriers and rates are going to be really similar. When you jump into commercial though, you are really paying your agent to go out to the market, because there are hundreds of carriers and hundreds of options. And so going back to the fact that there are no two businesses that are the same. This is not just like a puzzle you're putting together, it's a Rubik's Cube. So you've got an auto, you've got a home, you've got an umbrella policy, you've got the GL, you've got the work comp, you've got your property, inland marine, employment practices. So you've got a handful of policies very quickly to look at. And, even from your perspective, Todd, what are the odds that one carrier is going to be the very best bet for every single one of those policies? It's very minimal. They're going to be very good on your GL and maybe your property, but they're not going to be very good on the inland marine and the work comp. And so really finding a good agent that knows your industry and knows your market and can go to bat for you and say, hey, I'm going to do a little bit more work on this, but what it's going to allow us to accomplish for you is you're going to save 30% because I'm going to put your GL with this company, and then I'm going to put your work comp with that one. And then I'm even going to split your property down the middle. I'm going to put your property, your inventory with this carrier, but your tools and inland marine coverage with that one. And then I'm even going to piece off your employment practice liability and go over here to this one and go to all specialists. And what ends up happening is you're going to get it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm going to buy this TV at Amazon, but I'm going to buy the HDMI cord at Best Buy, and then I'm going to get the wall mount here. At the end of the day, in the real world, that's a lot of driving around time, so you don't really want to do it. But when you're working with a good agent, a good broker, they can do that for you. And what's nice is you're not stuck going, gosh, I've got 12 different carriers or 5 different carriers. You have one point of contact to your agent. And again, they're very well versed with what you're doing. They know exactly what you need and when you need it, if that makes sense. Again, I like the analogy of the Rubik's Cube because there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Yeah. What are a couple of questions? What are the top 2 or 3 questions a contractor can ask their agent in order to get them to work on their behalf and go shopping for them?
It's a great question. What I would say is depending on timing, if you're getting new quotes or they're remarketing your account and they're renewing it, ask where they took it. What markets did you send this to? And if you want to get even more specific, you can ask that per policy. Because again, you're in the construction space, general liability most of the time is going to an excess market, a surplus market. But your auto almost never needs to do that. So if you're asking, hey, where did you take my auto, and where did you take my general liability, and where did you take my work comp, it really will force that agent to go, gosh, did I look at each one of those individually for the best possible place to put them? Or did I just say, oh, where's the general liability going to go? Because that's the hardest one to place, and then just take everything there to keep it all with one spot. So I would ask where you're taking this policy. And then second, just kind of going back to what we were just talking about, ask how each policy is being rated. And typically it's going to be in those quotes, but if you're like me, it's even tough for us to read through all the insurance jargon in those 50 and 60 pages of policy documents. So a lot of times that's buried in there. So maybe ask them to pull out your schedule of hazards so that you can take a look at it right away. Those would be the 2 biggest ones that I would be looking at if I was going to be reviewing my insurance.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. One other strategy I wanted to talk about that is an opportunity to save money on insurance would be doing a better job of time tracking. And we touched on this a little bit in the cost codes and the job costing for certain activities. But is there an opportunity to save money on insurance and workman's comp by doing a better job of time tracking between different activities with true employees?
Yes, exactly. It's really going to be exactly what we were talking about. If you're tracking your time more closely, it just allows you to segment it and put that time in the proper bucket. And if the proper bucket is a lower cost to you, for example, on your work comp, if you've got, we see this quite a bit. We'll see, specifically in roofing, you'll see executive supervisor, or call it roofing. It's two different classifications on work comp. Executive supervisor can kind of have two different distinctions. Is that supervisor getting on the roof, or are they strictly on the ground, just kind of managing the day-to-day of the job? That rate is going to be very different. So if you have two different executive supervisors, for example, and one of them really just kind of goes job to job, to just make sure the crews are staying, on track, but maybe you have, call it a junior executive supervisor that's really on the job site and hops up on the roof from time to time, they're going to be rated differently. And a lot of times people will not classify one over the other. That's a really big one. So yeah, the more that you're detailed with your time, the more likely it is that an auditor is not going to go, at the end of the day, they're going to say, prove it. The burden of proof is going to be on the owner. So if you've got good time cards, however you're going to keep it, they're going to be very easy to work with. And then honestly, at your next audit, they're going to go, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. They're ducks in a row. When we come in to audit it, it's just, they're going to take your word for it instead of someone that comes in with a mess of paperwork.
Yeah. And what this looks like in real terms would be, you can use software. There's a program that I used several years ago called T-Sheets. And actually I have, I think there's a special deal. If you go to constructionleadingedge.com/T-Sheets, it's a time tracking software. You can set up job codes. And what I did with the company that I ran several years ago was had the guys and gals clock in to different cost codes for travel time, or I called it mobilization. And then were you running a piece of equipment? Were you an operator? Were you a laborer? And in building construction, it could be, were you on the roof? Were you hanging drywall? What type of activities were you doing? And then you can associate those cost codes in your time tracking system to a workman's comp rate. And as opposed to just lumping it all together, in which case, if you're audited, it sounds like you're going to end up paying the highest rate. So that's where you can actually save a lot of money and pay the right amount by time tracking. So maybe you're thinking, I don't want to invest in technology. It's going to be a couple $100 a month. Well, it's very possible that time tracking software will save you thousands of dollars every month in workman's comp cost, especially if you have a big organization. So that is great advice there. So to recap, ways to save money on insurance. One would be to shop your policies, challenge your agent, ask them questions like, where are you taking it? How is it rated? Show me the schedule of hazards. Mix and match the policies. Don't just take the low-hanging fruit, and then put some time tracking system in place. You can use T-Sheets. I know Co-Construct and other software systems like that have the ability to track time. So big opportunities there. There could be 5 and 6 figure savings available by just doing some really simple things.
Yeah, that's T-Sheets. I wrote that down. I'm going to be sharing that with our clients, because and I'll tell you that one of the biggest headaches we get is audits. You see it all the time. I'm currently working with a client right now. We got their policies in place, and I'll be honest, when we took over them and started getting things done, they were a mess. They were all over the place. It was done incorrectly, and they knew it. They said they knew it. Someone had left. They hit an audit, and like anyone, it was a large audit. It was about a $60,000 audit for work comp. And they called us and just they were losing it. They were so angry about the audit, and we kind of looked at it and go, here's the numbers you wrote down. I don't know your business. You're got to tell us the numbers. And really what it came down to was that they weren't tracking the time well enough, and they thought it was going to go into one category, but it went into another. And this particular contractor, they were a plumbing and HVAC contractor. And this one, it was very unique. It was a great story. And we ended up getting it figured out for them. But all the payroll for the rating was put under HVAC. And it would ended up being that it's almost all plumbing payroll. And that difference in payroll it's about a 7 or 8 times the rate to go over to plumbing. And so we looked at it and we go, gosh, this is a large audit. They're going to have to pay it. We ended up working with the underwriter and got them to honor the original rate for the year and left it under HVAC. But they're not going to renew the policy, so we got to move it. But it got them out of about a $50,000 audit. But man, you track that. That's a very quick and easy one. That you're exactly right. That will save you thousands and thousands of dollars. So I can't imagine that the cost would be it's almost invaluable to have something like that.
Yeah. And then you think about an audit, the time that you would have to spend to go back and do post-mortem analysis and recreate data and all of the things you could be spending that time on if you could just prevent that problem by having good systems in place. Absolutely invaluable. So let's talk about an audit, and then we'll talk about some commonly missed coverages. What are a few things people can do to prepare themselves for an audit? We've talked about getting time tracking in place, having cost codes or job costing in place. What else are some things? What are some other things at the top of the list that people can do to prepare for an audit?
Yeah. So the first thing is really understanding what the auditor wants. That's probably half the battle. They're going to want to look at you and go, hey, here's exactly the policy that we put into place a year ago for you. So they're going to want to know, they're going to want you to prove it. They're going to want you to prove the numbers that you told them. So having your numbers ready, how organized are those numbers? I imagine if you're using something like T-sheets, something to track those times, it's very easy to export something. So they're going to want to prove that. So make sure you've got your ducks in a row, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's your bookkeeper. If you've got a good bookkeeper, again, you've got some time tracking. Second, if you're using subcontractors, they want to see those subcontractor certificates to prove that those subs have insurance, because it goes right back to what we were talking about with those uninsured subs. If you can't produce a certificate that shows that your subcontractor had their own GL and they waived the work comp, then they're going to come back and go, well, who's this one? Who's this guy? And you're going to tell them, well, no, they have insurance. And they're going to go, well, prove it. So you need to have all your subcontractor certificates. So a very easy way to do that is just create a folder on the desktop, Google Drive, Dropbox, wherever you guys manage files, and every single job have every single certificate sitting there, and have it very organized and very clear so that you can produce those very, very quickly now and then even into the future should something else come up. Those are two really big ones: numbers and your certificates right away. A way to be a little bit more ready for this is the insurance industry, I'm sure, as everyone kind of realizes, no one likes it. Understandable. It's a backwards industry and it's very antiquated. You put a policy into place, and then, about 60, 90 days ahead of the renewal, you renew the policy. And then shortly after renewing, you do your audit. Realistically, it makes a lot more sense to maybe 30 to 60 days prior to do your audit and then renew the policy. Reason being, I'm just going to use maybe some just arbitrary numbers, but if I'm a roofing company and I'm coming up for renewal here in, let's say, June or July, a few months from now, what I would like to do and what I like to do with my clients is I say, hey, let's just kind of pretend we're having an audit. That way, one, you're getting ready for it. It's like getting ready for taxes. Let's get all your certs ready. Let's get those into a nice folder. Let's get all these payroll numbers that are going to confirm what we did on this last policy, because your audit is on your last year's policy. So when we go through that audit, that mock audit on our end with the client while we're going to renew the policy, it's very cut and dry, where we go, hey, you said you were going to do 2.5 million in revenue. You were going to have $1 million in roofing payroll and 500,000 in gutter subcontracted work. So we go through that audit while we're renewing, and what we find is, oh, hey, you had a great year. You did 3 million in revenue, and you had actually about 250,000 more in payroll and about 200,000 more in sub cost. That allows us to do two things. It allows us to renew the policy at the right rate. Say, hey, was this a big year? Was it something out of the normal? Do we need to increase these numbers moving forward so that you're rated properly, on the next term? But it also lets us get ahead of the audit a few months ahead of time. So we can go, hey, you were rated off this number, but you did a little bit more. You're going to be expecting to see XYZ in terms of an audit amount. The nice thing about doing that 90 days out is you now have 90 more days to prepare to pay for that audit, versus when you've done your audit, they want that check right then and there, and they're not very on your side about it. They want that money and they want it right then.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really big one that we try to do, to keep it all right at the same time. So we renew your policy with the proper numbers as to what you did last year. And again, we make any tweaks that we need to. We give them the heads up of, hey, here's what the audit may look like, because we're not the ones performing it, it's the carrier. And then when they come into their audit, a couple of months after renewing, well, they already feel like they went through it. They've got all the documents. The auditor comes, they lay it out. The auditor is happy. It takes 30 minutes, and they're very, very easy. They're very streamlined. And to go back to what you said, that's time that you can't get back, and there's no worse way to spend time than on insurance and an audit at the same time.
Great advice. Absolute great advice. Let's talk about some small coverages that are frequently missed.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, with carriers making a lot of updates and changes and pulling little bits out of policies, and honestly, even adding stuff to things. So if you're in the construction space, one of the biggest ones that you should be looking at is contractor E&O coverage. It is essentially errors and omissions for contractors. So it's not a full-blown professional liability is another way to say errors and omissions. So think of it this way: professional liability, errors and omissions is the insurance that I myself would have, or a lawyer, someone for a service that we're providing. I don't have an actual product, but if I advise poorly, that would be professional liability, not general liability. So where contractor E&O comes in is, let's say you're coming into a building, you're following some plans, and you do some plumbing, you do some drywall, you do all of that. What happens is there's a leak in the plumbing, and it causes a lot of water damage, through multiple floors. The drywall's wet, and as you know, Todd, water's terrible. It's not a good one. So your general liability. Let me back up. When you jump into that claim to fix the damage, you find that for some reason the piping wasn't put in quite right. Maybe it didn't follow the plans quite correctly. Maybe it was just you had a bad guy on a bad day, or he had something going on in his personal life and missed something, and it was a negligence on his part. So the damage that's caused from that incident, that is your general liability. No problem there. Everything's going to be replaced. Everything's going to be fixed on the general liability side. What portion of that claim will not be picked up by your general liability policy is going to be fixing the inaccuracies in the work caused by your business, if that makes sense. So if it was found that every single bolt was put on wrong on a pipe fitting throughout the entire building, but only one area was where the damage was, and you have to go in and pull drywall out all over the building to fix everything, that's contractor E&O. It's going to go in and fix the error that you made. The general liability is only fixing resulting damage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So GL will replace the damaged drywall, the damaged carpet, whatever other problems there were, but it won't go fix the root cause of the problem.
Yep, it won't pay for the man hours that you're going to have to pay, the new material cost. It's essentially like faulty work, and so it can be a little bit of a blurry line sometimes, but when that claim comes up, it's always cut and dry as to when that works, and maybe even a dovetail off of that. If you're working with subcontractors, I'm sure you have a good, I'm sure your guys, if they're listening to you, they've got good subcontractor agreements in place. That's a requirement we're starting to have our larger contractors require from their subs, because that faulty work can happen. And these claims, some of them that we've seen, they're jaw dropping, and you go, gosh, adding contractor E&O, which is not, this isn't a very expensive coverage. We're not talking, 50% more on your premium. These are add-ons. So again, it goes back to just having a really good and versed agent in your space. So contractor E&O is a very, very big one that we're pushing quite a bit more.
One question on that. Let's talk about a specific situation. Let's say in that case, a plumbing contractor installed the wrong size piping, and they just messed up. Mm-hmm. Is there, if the damage was caused because a contractor put in the wrong size piping, would their general liability cover that? Cover the damages?
Yeah. So it depends on how the claim comes about. But if that pipe had some sort of damage that it caused, yeah, the general liability covers the resulting damage. But the big caveat is what's it going to cost you to go fix the damaged work? So think of it this way. Let's say there is no claim. They put the wrong piping in. The job is done. They sealed the walls. Maybe you as the owner are checking out the specs of the job, and you somehow, I don't know, you're checking your receipts and you go, oh my gosh, you used a 6-inch pipe and you should have used a 2. This is completely wrong. There is no damage yet. How do you make that claim? At that point, you as the owner of the construction company, you're really obligated to go back to the client and go, hey, we did this wrong and we need to replace it, but how much is that going to cost? And that is that's contractor E&O right there, where even if you caught it, there's no damage, you could make a claim to go fix your work. Without that coverage, you're just writing the check, which means you might have done that job for free.
Got it. Good stuff. What are some other coverages that are frequently overlooked?
So 2 other big ones, installation floater and employment practice liability, and even 3, I'll say cyber. Those ones, let's chat about installation floater first, because employment practice liability and cyber can a lot of times go on the same form. But the installation floater is a really unique one. A lot of people just never even think about this, but there's a point when you are doing work where you have materials and equipment being transported to the job site and on the job site, but they're not installed yet. You see it all the time. You see bricks on the side of a job site. You see pallet after pallet of drywall, maybe a really expensive air conditioning unit, depending on what the job is. If you don't have an installation floater, none of that's covered. And it's just, again, it's a very small window, but there is no coverage until that stuff is actually installed on a job site. So an installation floater is going to cover your materials while they're in transit and before being installed. So a couple of scenarios. You've got the materials being transported on a trailer. And there's certainly going to be a lot of offshoots to this, but just a very easy example. That trailer tips over and everything goes into a lake, or maybe it's just incredibly damaged. There's no coverage for that without an installation floater. There may be some areas where, depending on how it's being transported, maybe it's not your company, maybe it's somebody else's company, and they've added you. Then you've got some recourse there. But if it's your team transporting stuff, I think of a plumber a lot of times that carries maybe a couple of 6 hot water heaters in the back of their trucks. That truck tips over, all of those are damaged. Do you have coverage? And that can be a lot of material coverage, depending on the equipment coming in, or a custom home with granite, or something along those lines. And then the other claim you see frequently is going to be on the job site. People get sticky fingers sometimes, and someone drives by a job site and maybe didn't get locked up well enough, or maybe they just really want that industrial fridge, or whatever it might be, and they go steal it. As soon as it's installed, that's totally different than what we're talking about. It is in transit and while on job site. Again, this is just like that contractor E&O. This is nominal. It's very small. On average, with any contractor, no matter how small they are, we'll typically do 25,000 in transit and on job sites, just as a standard, just to say, hey, this is what we would at least recommend. Do you ever think you transport more than this at one time? And then obviously we'll step people up to 50 to 100, maybe 150,000 in coverage, just depending on types of jobs they're working on. But that one, again, that's a very rare, to be honest, that I ever see that when comparing somebody else's policy.
That's great advice. Sounds like a no-brainer to me. Let's talk about employment practices, liability, and cyber for a few minutes.
Yeah, those are the two fastest growing segments of really all insurance, what we're seeing in terms of claims. If you follow insurance news, which I can't imagine anybody would, unless, they're maybe trying to go to sleep at night. But the steady increase in cyber claims has jumped, 125% year over year for the last handful of years. So cyber is a really easy one to add. Again, this is very, very small, very, very inexpensive. Every business should have this. The easy way to think about this is if Facebook and Wells Fargo and Home Depot and Target, if they got hit, do you think your systems are a little bit more secure than theirs? It's doubtful. So the big one to think about is there's a lot of areas where this is going to come into play. But how much would you be out in your business if your website went down for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? We have a client, a very small improv movie theater, of all things. Their website went down for 2 weeks and they lost $80,000 because they couldn't sell tickets. It's a cyber claim. It's not general liability that doesn't fit anywhere else but cyber. So cyber is a really big one. If you're ever taking payments, if you're ever taking anyone's personal identifying information, name and address and emails, and having that anywhere on your systems, cyber, you got to have it. If somebody comes in and what you're starting to see is these social engineering claims come up where we all see them. Everyone seems to have an uncle in Nigeria or somewhere that has, just died and is going to leave you $2 million, or hey, send me a gift card. You see these emails that are they're very believable now. They're very believable. Sometimes they'll look like they're coming from the owner of your company on a weekend, and all it takes is clicking a link in there. You probably even see these from Apple and from Google. Not from them, but it looks like it's from them. Hey, it looks like one of your passwords was hacked. Click here to reset your password. As soon as you click that, the hacker is in your guys' system, and it is the cost of the forensics to go in and how did it happen? How do we stop anything else from happening? What data did they get? If they did get any personal identifying information, the immediate response that you see, and you've probably seen this in the news, is you need to now pay for anyone that had their information compromised for some sort of identity theft for 12 to 18 months. And 150 people, let's say, which is not a lot, times what does LifeLock cost every month? So those claims can really skyrocket really, really quick. And again, I can't stress how inexpensive this policy is. A lot of times you're gonna see that packaged with maybe some employee theft and employment practice liability, which we can talk about in just a sec. But yeah, have you ever come across cyber or been hearing much about it, Todd?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wild one. We see some really unique claims. I'll share one. Again, I've got claim stories for days. I've got a specific client, really unique business where they honestly are not like any other business. They probably got 12 different style policies. Every single policy that you might see available, this company needs it. The one policy they did not look at buying, and they pay $60,000-$70,000 a year in insurance because they're a large sized company, was the cyber multimedia policy that we put into place for them, or the quote that we sent them. It's $2,500, just as an example. They are now in lawsuit because of a trademark infringement, which is the multimedia portion of the cyber coverage. It's very clear, it just doesn't fit anywhere else on any policy. And they're currently sitting at about $350,000 in legal bills. And it's sad, but they're not going to have any coverage for it. And all they had to do was pay for the $2,500 cyber policy. So it's just that one hurts for sure.
Yeah, sounds like another no-brainer. But what is employment practices liability?
So employment practice liability is think of it this way. It's your worst employee on their worst day. And it's going to cover first and third parties. So let's go through those kind of in order. So first party, this is going to be in office. You've got an employee that says something as a joke they thought was funny. Somebody in the office thinks it was offensive. Racism, sexism, anything along those lines.
Hold on. We're talking about construction, so nothing inappropriate is ever uttered on a construction site. So
that's exactly right. Yeah, this one may not fit.
if somebody, let's say an architect or somebody is listening, maybe this will help them. So go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, worst employee on their worst day. They say something wrong. Somebody just, they don't take it quite right. And who knows, maybe it was wrong. That's going to be a claim right there. Wrongful terminations a lot of times can fall under here. Unfair business practice. If somebody comes in to interview, which you will see this, a lot more than you'd think. Someone comes in to interview, they don't get a job, they're going to sue because they're going to say they didn't get the job because XYZ reason or something that the interviewer maybe, had a prejudice against them. It's a lot of the kind of the Me Too movement. A lot of these things that you're seeing in the news nowadays, it's very popular, sexual harassment at the workplace and those sorts of items. So that's going to be, in office types of things. If you have one employee, you need this coverage. You absolutely have to have it. Third party, this one's really interesting to me as well, is even if a client walks into my office, if my front desk gal or guy says something rude or something off-putting to the person walking in, that's the claim too. So anybody third party as well, or you're going to a homeowner's place of business and you do something that offends them, that's where that coverage is going to come in. So we always try to say worst employee on their worst day, because again, I'm sure they're not, who knows, maybe they're not trying to be malicious, but we're all people with our own backgrounds, and you never know how someone's going to.
Very true. Worst employee on your worst day. That puts a fine point on it. Well, we are just about out of time, Sean. If people want to find out more about you and get in touch with you, where can they go? Talk a little bit about what you do exactly for contractors, and then tell them where they can go to find out more and get in touch with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, we put custom insurance programs together for the construction space. Exactly what we were talking about today. We want to try and look at every business a little bit more unique. And I think we're probably the most cutting edge option out there in the country, to be completely honest, and not try to toot our own horn. And it's really just because there's a lot of changing of the guard in insurance right now. There's a lot of technology coming in. There's a lot of people leaving the industry, and a lot of young blood coming in. And we're pretty aggressive with how we go out there and try to connect with people, and how we try to go to bat with carriers and underwriters on their behalf. So again, we put custom programs together. We certainly do not use one size fits all approaches. We look at every different individual policy and way that we can put this and package it together to provide as much value as possible. The other things that we do that you're really not going to find a whole lot out there is we really want to make policy document management very easy. We try to use cutting edge solutions to have this all online. You have a driver that gets pulled over. We want to be able to have your ID card online so you can pull it up. Simple things like that. We want to go through ahead of your renewal. We want to do the audit with you, that mock audit, so that we can help you renew and help you get ready for the audit, so there's no surprises. So that's really where we try to be a little bit unique and different. Where people can find me, they can get a general overview of who I am, kind of see my face on a website. It's going to be bptinsurance.com, business protection team for short, bptinsurance.com. And if they'd like to find me on LinkedIn, it's Sean Mulhern, SEAN, and last name MULHERN. You'll definitely find me there. And then by all means, shoot me an email directly. I'm happy to give any advice. If you're happy where you're at, but you just want to kind of bounce something off me, I'm happy to chat insurance. My email is Sean, SEAN, at bptinsurance.com.
Good stuff. And I'll make sure and have those links in the show notes. And At the end of the podcast, I'll share that link where you can get those show notes. But this has been extremely helpful. Frankly, the advice that you shared in here is worth probably thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars in potential liabilities that can be covered, savings on insurance. So if you're listening to this, you really owe it to yourself and your company and your family to take a good hard look and take Sean up on his offer to get his help. So Sean, thanks so much. This was extraordinarily helpful, man.
Todd, I had a great time. Thanks again for having me. You're doing a lot of awesome stuff here with the podcast and the website. I know your listeners are lucky to have you.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thanks so much. You can go to constructionleadingedge.com/119 to get all of the links and the show notes and everything we talked about. Find Sean's contact information. Avail yourself of Sean's knowledge. He provided his information. He is willing to talk to you and help you because that's what he does. He wants to help you avoid some of those big risks. And don't forget, if you want to offload your construction bookkeeping and payroll and accounting headaches, go to constructionleadingedge.com/headache to find out what the Apparatus Contractor Services team can do for you. And if you want to find out some of the biggest mistakes that you are probably making when it comes to selling, then go get my cheat sheet with the 9 biggest mistakes that could be killing your sales over at constructionleadingedge.com/sell, SELL. And you can always get the free video series, The Secrets of Successful Contractors, at constructionleadingedge.com/owner. I appreciate the ratings and reviews. I'll read a new review that came in just recently. This is from Minnow Peachy, who says this, quote, "A great podcast full of useful information. It's that good you feel guilty for getting that much information for free." Well, I appreciate that. It's good to hear. My business development strategy is give massive value, not necessarily to make people feel guilty, but I'm glad it's that good. So if you could take a few minutes, leave a rating, leave a review on iTunes or the podcast player of your choice, I would greatly appreciate it. It's always good to hear feedback, and it helps get it out there to the rest of the world. So thanks for listening. If you want to find out more about what I'm up to or get in touch with me, the best place to go is constructionleadingedge.com. There are some red buttons on that page where you can download my resources. You can schedule a call with me, find out more about what is going on there. But let me know how I can help. I am Todd DeWalt from constructionleadingedge.com. See you next time.